So I left Islam about 5 years ago, and it was really a gradual process. Like there isn't a kind of that happens to be the case for a lot of people who leave religion. There isn't a kind of specific point that they can point to, and they can say, oh, okay, that's when I left. That was the day that I sort of. Although there was a day where it was sort of like, okay, that's it. I'm sure. But it was a gradual process of just seeing different perspectives, seeing anything slight from like just seeing slightly less religious classmates to seeing completely different perspectives, especially with the internet. Growing up with that, we get to see a different kind of world that we don't really get to imagine with what we're taught growing up, a world where religion is not necessarily the most fundamental and defining aspect of everything in society. And we get to, at least in my experience, I got to interact with different people and just talk about things. And every now and then a topic would come up like the concept of a soul or life after death. And I would hear things I didn't think about before that somehow contradicted what I thought was uh, what my point of view that could not be pierced through by any kind of contradictions. Gradually speaking to different people and actually looking at critiques of other religions, such as Christianity, and seeing how they apply to Islam, and just looking at Islam itself, right? Because you could say, well, okay, Islam is different. Well, okay, these people don't know what they're talking about. Well, okay, I don't know what I'm talking about. Surely there must be an explanation in Islam, right? It's not actually that terrible. It's not that unscientific. It's just people misinterpreting it. But then you go and take a look at it, and maybe you could say from the scientific point of view, there's metaphors being used or whatever, but from the moral point of view, I think there's not much wiggle room there. So when you have, for example, a verse in the Quran telling uh, men to beat their disobedient wives, a lot of people try to say, well, the word beat here doesn't mean beats. It actually means something else. And even if you were to take that, doesn't that say something about the kind of messenger that God is for this kind for this word to be so misinterpreted, for it to be so open to interpretation. Um, in addition, I think it's clear how Islam treats minorities, sexual minorities, right? LGBT plus people, and in part of seeing different people on the internet was interacting with those kind of people, that exact kind of people themselves, and really just having to ask myself, are these people really going to hell? Why? What for? So that's what concerns the moral aspect of it for me, I suppose. I can remember as far back as about 5 years old at most. I was going down this slide, and my mother was telling me something about Allah and how I have to worship him or something. Uh, and then I told her, this Allah guy, he doesn't sound very nice. And then uh, she told me, well, if you say that, he'll literally, like the way she said it, it's this expression, he'll put you in the fire, as in he'll burn you in hell. To which I said, well, inshallah, Allah dies. And then she was like, oh, look, you used that expression. That's where it comes from. It's like, oh, damn, this guy is everywhere. He's even in our language, right? And I also grew up with Shia Islam. And then seeing that contrasted by Sunni Islam and hearing, I guess, the critical voice from the Sunni side, mostly just blind discrimination, to be honest, that did like sort of give a spark. Like, why is that? Like, this is supposed to be a good reliable religion? Why is there so much conflict? And then you could say, well, okay, they're following the wrong kind of the religion. Well, even if you go to the what was supposed to be the right kind of it, you just start to look at the ceremonies, and they were very. I mean, I would say cultish, but the whole thing is cultish and sort of like a it gives a stereotypical image of what of the concept of a cult. But in the sense that, for example, part of the ceremonies was chest beating, and then I was like, I don't want to do that, and I was kind of pressured to do it, right? And I was also pressured to go to these ceremonies to begin with. Um, and growing up in Iraq, I also often ask myself, like, why are things so different here? Why are they so bad, right? Because it's a war-torn environment, among other things. So there was this sort of curiosity about why is the society like that? And then I guess that extended to the rest of the Islamic world, and then asking, okay, why is the Islamic world like that? Could it be because of Islam? So not too long after my apostasy, I actually uh, told my classmates by accident. Well, first I told my parents also by accident, and that's, I mean, it ended well, relatively speaking, considering that my head and neck are still attached. I expected the worst case scenario. So, whilst it didn't go well with my parents, it could have gone a lot worse. When it came to school, I got a lot of, first, it was just weird comments, then bullying and harassment, death threats. There was this one time a classmate just walked up to me and showed me a beheading video. So, and in addition, even like when it comes to just staying anonymous and not, or sorry, staying private when it comes to this aspect of life and not telling anyone about it. Not only does it hurt to not be able to talk about this, but you also feel isolated because there's this sense that there's something shameful about the way you think, about what you've decided to do with your own beliefs. And it's not even a conscious decision, right? You don't just wake up someday and choose, okay, I'm not going to believe this. You can't in this moment just choose to believe something else. And yet you're punished for it. And it's not even something harmful by necessity. If anything, it's a good thing to question your beliefs and to follow where your mind, where your reasoning leads you, and that's a beneficial thing to a society. And yet it's punished, and because of the way so much of society is often based off of religion, you just automatically alienated from all of that. And what was before a source of community and understanding and a way of making sense of the world, now it's something that you feel excluded from, that you are distant away from. And the way it's so relevant and so it's everywhere, so you feel alienated by everything else, and not even by just by everything else, but even including yourself sometimes. I guess it's because you did what you couldn't help to do, which was to trust the people around you and to assume that the things you hear everywhere around you are true. You start losing trust in your ability to believe things a second time. At least that's been my experience. You believe these things, they turn out to be very wrong, very far off from the truth. And so you, you start having this fear, this mistrust in believing again in anything sometimes. Because what if it could be wrong? You're so sure about religion and God. So what's to say that? you won't be wrong a second time, right? And of course, we can be wrong and then we can correct. But because of, I guess, the impact of apostasy and leaving Islam in general, it's there is a certain trauma to that, I suppose. And when it comes to trusting others and the alienation front, because the violent, uh, really laws and religious practices around apostasy and sort of degradation of anyone who's a non-believer, especially someone who used to be a believer but then quit, that really makes it difficult to trust people, even though there are some, not just some, many nice people who don't believe this, or even if they did, they would be nice people up until the point that you find out they find out about your apostasy. So it's a lot to deal with. So for the first time that I ever considered leaving Islam, I remember the first thing that popped into my head was my Islamic upbringing teacher, because in school we had this subject called Islamic upbringing, which is where they teach you about Islam and how true it is. So I got this memory of that teacher just telling us about how it's punishable by death. Um, in addition, it's also I cannot remember a whole lot of discussion about apostates in general. I mean, it's sort of implicit, like you're good because you're Muslim, you're part of us because you're Muslim, and all of these Christians and Jews and other uh, non-Muslims are bad. So let alone someone who leaves Islam, right? It's sort of the very idea that an ex-Muslim person exists. It's not. There is this expression, choking something by silence, choking the topic by silence, right? And in fact, a lot of ex-Muslims, they share this sentiment in the sense that they don't know that that leaving their religion is even an option up until they find out that there are other ex-Muslims out there and they're not just being whispered to by the devil, right? That's another thing. These doubts, they're often framed as phases, as whispers from the devil, as possession by jinn, etc. So I think when it comes to my family, not just my family, I guess this is a general thing. It came to the point where people thought that something fundamental about me changed. You're still at the core the same person, and you're still another person. You're not, because then they start to view you as a non-Muslim, right? And when being a Muslim is such an important aspect of a person for them, then you're drastically different. You must have lost all of those traits that made you another member of the community, that
Hmm.
made you a friend, a family member, or a classmate, even. Um, Especially when it came to family. I mean, it's difficult to think about how differently I would have been treated if I said otherwise. Um, but there's definitely like a difference. Again, it's the same thing, right? And I think especially when it comes to colleagues, there's a certain element of shunning and estrangement, um, where you're just not wanted to be included as part of anything. Or sometimes there's even fear, right? Because another thing is you're viewed as a fundamental threat to them, not just in this life, but also in the afterlife. Because if you somehow manage to spread your infection to them, then they're going to hell along with you. And that's another thing with family is there is almost a sense of desperate desperate attempts to help you because They literally think you're going to burn up in hell for eternity. Just allowing someone else to hold a different view other than the absolute truth, you're being implicit in their ignorance, supposedly. And you're allowed to counteract that ignorance up to the point of physical violence. And this is what makes it so difficult to trust people, even those who don't hold those views, because you don't know who to trust anymore. And it's not even a question of Muslim or non-Muslim at some point. It really sometimes destroys fundamental elements of human connection. It was this thought of, okay, so someone thought of making this, right? Someone created this, and there's this entire program, this entire institution around this. So surely other people are experiencing the same thing. And I was also at a significantly bad period in my life due to that disconnect felt by apostasy, right? Even if people don't outwardly go out of their way to exclude you, even if they don't know about it, you just feel automatically excluded. So because of that, I was really pushed to look for help. And I found Free Hearts, Free Minds sort of indirectly. And it really is true. At first, it was a bit stressful, anxiety inducing. Oh, they'll judge me. Oh, they won't understand me. But it's quite the contrary, right? These are people who have gone through very similar things, who are non-judgmental, and it's really been a safe space that has allowed for this trust to reflourish, really. One thing about apostasy is that when you sort of lose this, when the rug is pulled from beneath your feet, right? When you realize that it's all false, you sort of realize just how much there is to do, how much you have to discover again, right? You have to rebuild uh, from scratch. You have to ask yourself again, what is true? What is that truth? Can I ever reach it? And what about things that are more fundamental, right? Like I can't just point to the Quran or the Hadith anymore. Like I can't just say, "Oh, I'll ask God when I get to heaven" or something, right? These are things that you really find open themselves to you because now the sort of the barriers of Islam are gone. So your mind is freed. And in this freedom, there comes this sort of uh, fundamental anxiety because you're so free, because you can believe, well, because there are so many possible beliefs, because there's so much to think about. You, you have this freedom, which comes with it, this anxiety. Uh, but then through that, uh, we can start to live. We can truly start to uh, trust ourselves again by comparing ideas and just thinking again without those barriers, right? And personally, this has helped me a lot in viewing things on a more fundamental level and taking comfort in fluid uncertainty rather than rigid certainty, especially certainty of not so true seeming beliefs, beliefs that didn't really connect with reality, that didn't really show much consideration for others. And it can be it's also helped me to meet like-minded people by even in real life, right? Outside of Free Hearts and Free Minds, sometimes I could open a discussion with someone and then see where their reasoning goes from there. And then it's really something beautiful that is behind this curtain of Islam, so to speak. A few students and I, currently in our college, we've been organizing these semi-weekly discussions where we talk about different subjects, and in each of these different subjects, sometimes themes of religion come up, themes of different ideas are linked to religion and linked to this sort of fundamentalism where you're not allowed to question things. And in that, we can hope to, I mean, it's not just a means to an end of like converting people out of Islam, but it's also a way of really planting seeds in people's minds. And that's how it goes for a lot of people, myself included, right? It's just thinking about one thing and another that's sort of not exactly related to Islam, but then applying it to Islam, or hearing a comment here and there. And again, it's not just about Islam, but just about thinking more freely and considering different perspectives. I guess I would just like to remind people that they're not alone in this. And it's just a matter of not being able to talk about it. That's why it seems you're so alone. There could be someone just like you right next to you that you don't know about. Now, that doesn't mean that you tell all of your classmates about your beliefs and then try to find out about who agrees with you or not. That was kind of my case, although it came by accident. And to also reassure people, because sometimes I would tell some of my friends about Free Hearts, Free Minds, and they would be hesitant out of fear for trusting this organization. But I would personally reassure people that it's really a good institute, and it's a very amazing experience with this program. And so, to those who uh, can support it, I think it would be a very good thing.